Thanks for continuing on with us. I have with me on the line Dr. Rais Hussin, the CEO and President of EMIR Research. Very recently, you wrote an op-ed regarding the developments on the polling mechanisms and how we have missed some of the so-called blind spots. Maybe, Dr. Rais, we can start off with that, the precursor of this op-ed. Where is it coming from and what is it trying to prove?
I think when we continue to do our polls pre-G15 over a period of time, we relied on public data, election history, and EMIR Research own data and models. So it is actually a multi-technique approach. Be that as may, we have to accept that the unquantifiable data is not easy to be included, because these are the sentiments that will only emerge very, very close to the GE15, i.e. 1 or 2 weeks. This is a very, very important note to accept as a reality. So that is why, although in GE14 we got, EMIR Research got the numbers absolutely right and spot on, and also all the state elections we got spot on. But in this time, GE15, we realized that there are some blind spots that we missed. But EMIR Research is not alone in this missing the blind spots. I think most of the other research houses has also missed. But the thing is, the missing part is not so much as how a coalition like Pakatan Harapan or the Sabah coalition or the Sarawak coalition or perform. What we missed was the performance between Perikatan Nasional, Barisan Nasional. I think that is where the blind spot emerged.
Okay, I have some of the figures that EMIR Research presented. Maybe we can put it up on the screen. This first particular chart shows the popular vote percentage against the weeks of election, and you've mapped out BN, PH and PN. And how the various research houses or polling centers have negated all this. Generally speaking, we got the right idea that PH is actually leading the polls, but the range of each and every single one of these polling centers is actually quite huge. Do you think that these kind of polling mechanisms could be improved in future elections?
Absolutely. I think there were some extreme values in statistical analysis. There's something called extreme value, and in this context, the last 2 weeks before or preceding GE15, there have been some elements of extreme value, and that's why we have, and most research houses got it reasonably spot on the Pakatan Harapan performance. Unfortunately, there was a gap between the BN and PN. And largely, if you look at the numbers, even EMIR Research projection, we did only for Peninsula Malaysia. We projected that 77% voter turnout, and we were spot on. It was the eventual outcome. But out of the 164 contested seats, we were right in 111 seats, 22 very close call, and that 31 is something that we call as blind spots that we have not seen. Now, out of that 29, out of the 31 that is not seen or blind spots, 29 of them were won by Perikatan Nasional. And this is essentially between Perikatan Nasional and Barisan Nasional. So the sentiments that we were not able to see were between how the voters will vote for BN or OPN. We have seen over the years in Selangor, for instance, the voters have been increasingly moving out of Barisan Nasional. But if you look at the misses or the blind spots between BN and PN, it only concentrated in the states of Kedah, almost 6 seats, Kelantan, 4 seats, Perak, 5 seats, Pahang, 4 seats, and Selangor, 4 seats. So it is like, if you look at overall, we are seeing that the blind spot were only between Barisan Nasional and Perikatan Nasional, not so much as
I have this chart. Maybe you can help me go through this. This is a candlestick chart between the states on the turnout rate distribution among the states in Peninsular Malaysia. The wide range of Perak, for instance, and Penang and Kelantan. Maybe you can explain to us a little bit more on this particular candlestick chart.
If you look at the, in terms of the, again, we'll see this chart in the context of the turnover as in the context of the missed seats of the 31 seats, yeah? And we look, we have come up with a terminology like, of all the 31 seats, 28 Malay majority seat, 70% and above. About 90% above. So if you look at the composition of the blind spots in terms of either its turnout, either the voting pattern and all that, we are looking at a huge change in the way the Malay voters voted in the GE15 between Barisan Nasional and Perikatan Nasional. So it is established fact now, obviously, that Barisan Nasional and Perikatan Nasional, Barisan Nasional here means mainly UMNO, are competing in the same constituencies of a Malay majority.
Okay, speaking of which, the third chart that I can show right now on the screen is, of course, the decrease in Barisan Nasional vote share according to state following the 3 general elections. States like Johor, for instance, or some areas in Kedah, in Melaka, there has been up to negative 30 or negative 20% decrease. What does this tell you, Dr. Rais, when you mapped out this chart, or when EMIR Research mapped out this chart, when it comes to the fortunes of Barisan Nasional in the upcoming elections?
I think this is something that Barisan Nasional have to really look into. Particularly when I say Barisan Nasional, it is mainly UMNO. If you look at the MC performance, out of 44 parliamentary seats that was allotted to them, they only secured 2. MIC only secured 1. So primarily it's going to be the UMNO-led Barisan Nasional. UMNO really have to look into in detail what they need to do to overcome this negative results, i.e. They need to do a very honest postmortem. They have to do honest relook and recalibrate UMNO in the context of new political landscape and political reality.
Dr. Rais, we have to tie this with the economic realities of the country. We're looking at the Pakatan Harapan-led unity government under the Anwar Ibrahim administration. There's a lot that needs to be tied up with when it comes to policy, but with the intent of these political parties. One can easily argue that the economic mantra of PH and BN is actually quite aligned, pro-business, pro-commercial, pro-small enterprises. Do you think that this is actually quite a consistent notion on how things are going to be moved forward for this administration? And how does this contrast with, say, for instance, Perikatan Nasional and PAS and Bersatu's element of how they want to run the country economically?
I think it is very important to note that political stability and is very critical towards recalibrating and reinventing the Malaysian economy. Some would use the word rebuilding the Malaysian economy. But what type of political stability we are looking at? I mean, there are many countries that has political stability, like for instance in Africa, there are many African countries that have leaders who have been there for decades. So sometimes when you have political stability with one party leadership or anchored party leadership, it could also be detrimental in the medium to long term. So the political stability here must mean rule of law. The political stability here must mean strong institution as opposed to powerful individuals. Political stability here must mean efficiency or efficient bureaucracy. Political stability must mean low corruption. And political stability must mean investment enabling business climate. That means proper incentives, proper structure, proper system, and so on.
Dr. Rais?
Yeah.
We're just checking on the connection. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
I'm there. political
go
stability
on.
must be colored by stable governance, more importantly than just political stability for growth. And that's why I'm of the view that not all types of stability can lead to the growth that we desire. Coming to the policies of phenomenon, the unity government, or I would say Anwar's administration, I think the seven major thrusts that I always describe them. I think the most important part is the unity and understanding after very divisive elections. I think in his maiden speech, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim talked about radical transparency and good governance. I think this is very critical for Malaysia at this juncture, given the decades of issues with regards to governance and integrity. Obviously, he has took on curbing the cost elements, meaning which open tender, reduce the cost of operations, and so on and so forth, food security, digital transformation initiatives. I think these are all the economic policies that not necessarily populist, but it is essential and important for medium to long-term survivability of our country.
All right, one more chart before we continue on our conversation is this whole notion of seats that have been gotten correctly and incorrectly. As we can see, the wrong projection seats, 31 seats, as you alluded to earlier, compared to the correct call of 111 seats. It is basically tying in with the density of the population of the country. How do you tie these two elements up, the density of the population versus the ability for polling centres, especially one that is, say, for instance, EMIR research, on calling the seats correctly?
I think when you talk about the incorrect projections or wrong projections, we see there is a very important correlation between the density of the population. Like if you look at the city area, I mean, we all know that in some constituencies, there are hundreds of thousands of voters, and some constituencies less than 20,000 voters. And each of them represent one MP seat in the parliament. I think this is something that the present Anwar Ibrahim administration must look into and readjust to have a fairer representation. I think this is due to decades of gerrymandering that has happened in this country. So yes, if you look at that that particular belt, yeah, from Perlis to Kedah to the central spine of the Pahang, and then the northern part of Johor and so on, we see a trend there that this is where the rural to semi-urban, with exception one or two urban, the rest are all rural to semi-urban, where the issue of emotions, campaign versus rational campaign can easily be introduced. So yes, there is a direct correlation between the rural, semi-urban belt with lower population density with regards to what the eventual election result that we have not able to capture.
Two arguments that was presented, among the many arguments that you presented in the op-ed, is of course the idea of unsophisticated youth and money politics. Do you still stand by the notion that youth might not necessarily vote for, say, progressive candidates? They might still go for traditional or conservative candidates. Is that the real notion of where we stand right now when it comes to youth voters in Malaysia?
I think, as I alluded earlier, the emotions and rationality, I think this is a very important factor that all political parties must look at. And emotional campaign doesn't require too much of scientific elaboration. If you notice that Pakatan Harapan and also some of his coalition members like Muda, they want very rational campaign. And when you go into a rational campaign against a very the word that we use liberally is the unsophisticated youth, it is going to be a little bit challenging, right? So, and particularly in that belt that we were talking about, the central spine, and where the population density is low, with high Malay concentration, I think that is where the problem lies. if you look at, we all know that past they claim themselves to be an Islamist or Islamic party, which I always disagree with that notion. Be that as may, they have quite a good network of early schools, and this is where the indoctrination can happen and will happen. And because of the youth are still emerging from that education background and so on, and the environment, and so there are some issues with regards to that. However, if you look at the youth in the urban setting, I think things are a little bit different. So it all depends on how going forward, G16 and so on, although there should be policy, that this particular bucket has to be addressed. Money politics, yes, there was a surge in financial might of some of the political coalition, the political parties, and the use of the effective use of emotional campaign like TikTok and all the others. You see, when initially there were the campaign on social media using Twitter and all that, Pakatan Harapan seemed to be leading, but TikTok has far overtaken on the emotional campaign drive, and that really pushed the drive towards the ethnocentrist and religious conservatism among that particular belt, not necessarily in the urban setting, with the exception of one or two which even we miss, like Permatang Pau, for instance. We know that the winner is quite active in TikTok with his 2 minutes fatwa and or sermons and so on, as opposed to a candidate like Izza, who can bring forth a progressive outlook of the country. So this is where the political parties have to rethink and review how are they going to do going forward, particularly in the coming 6 state elections that is going to be within this year.
Dr. Rais, one more chart before I miss this one, presented by EMIR Research. Basically outlines what you discussed earlier: rural, semi-urban, and urban versus the proportion of Malay population. And this basically talks about the proportion of Perikatan Nasional votes in the previous general election. It's interesting that you brought out Permatang Pauh, because I would argue Permatang Pauh is a semi-urban seat with a high density of Malay population, but they're using, say, for instance, TikTok as the main platform or main channel to reach out to the voters. So it's really, not ubiquitous when it comes to reaching out to the voters, right? Do you feel that the candidates must be diverse enough or must be agile enough to use whatever channel that is possible to reach out to the necessary voter targets that they want to achieve?
I think absolutely. You cannot depend on only one medium of social media to address the issues or even to market what you are going to deliver. As I said, in this case, Izzah is a classic example. She's one of the easily the best and productive MPs that we can have. Unfortunately, she was edged out by someone who is very popular in TikTok with his very ethnocentric and religious conservatism type of messaging. I think we need to change that particular outlook going forward. And I think most of the political parties and also the candidates have now learned that it cannot be just one type or two types of social media interaction. You see, if you look at the percentage, there are higher percentages actually coming into in the TikTok field. And TikTok is a very powerful tool. I mean, if you remember, some of the countries have decided TikTok is harmful to their coexistence or existence as a political leadership of the country. Like, for instance, India, they banned TikTok. In the US, they are banning it to the government and devices and so on. So I'm not advocating for banning, but I'm advocating for optimum use of any medium to reach out to the targeted or intended recipient of that messaging. But the messaging must be responsible. It cannot be ethnocentric is okay. It is not bad. But to fan racial issues and so on, that is should not be allowed.
If you've just joined us, I'm with Dr. Rais Hussin, the President and CEO of EMIR Research. Another article that was presented by you or by EMIR Research is on the idea of isolation, from isolation to innovation. In it, you outline 7 key points, which is unity tolerance, transparency, good governance, curbing costs, food security, as well as creating good digital marketplace, embracing clean tech, and trying to attract good FDI in the so-called Malaysia 5.0. Perhaps in a very short or few words, Dr. Rais, maybe you can share with us where you think this government has been going when it comes to achieving this transformation journey under the Anwar administration, considering that they're still new, but they are entering 2 months of full working duties. Do you feel that they are on the right track, or do you feel that there's a lot left for wanting?
When I see the outcome of the 5 or 6 cabinet ministerial meetings as announced by the PMO, also the Ministry of Communication and Digital, I see that there are traction to that 7 strategic thrusts that EMIR Research has outlined. And we can see the importance as being given to that 7 strategic thrusts as you have well encapsulated. Now, if you ask me how effective is that, I think the fact that this 7 strategic thrusts is being focused, I think that's a very important start. But as you also said, that it is just a little too early to really assess and give them marks. However, let's wait for the 100th day, and then we will obviously do a reassessment and come up with our perspective of what we see Anwar Ibrahim's administration has and so far been able to achieve in that first 100 days. Now, if you ask me, can they do more? Obviously, they can do more, they can do better, but I think you inherit, I remember I inherited, or should I say, I was given a responsibility to run a particular government GLC for a period of time. And this is just a little agency. And when I saw the enormous problems and issues and challenges within that GLC, then I'm humbled to see that and very circumspect to comment on someone who have inherited the whole government machinery with 1.3 million civil service, about 400,000 GLC workers, and some entrenched culture, and it is not going to be easy. So let us wait, as you say, give them a little bit more time. But they are, I think, on the right track. But some things that they can do a little bit faster. For instance, in the area of food security, I think we need to have a holistic food security plans and strategies, making food security as a national security agenda, number 1. Number 2, immediately, just like many other countries who is performing very well in their global food security index, like Singapore, like Netherlands and Scandinavian countries, establish something called Malaysian Food Security Agency. And their role must be looking at all the policies, track the implementation of the policies with regards to food security. Because, as I repeated many times over, this year we are expecting 1/3 of the global economy to be in deep recession, according to IMF and World Bank, and Malaysia included. And remember, at the same time, we are highly a trading nation. We are very susceptible to what is happening in the global economy. So when that happens, thank God now our ringgit is strengthening. I think their confidence slowly coming back. I think Anwar Ibrahim's administration have pointed out certain specific strategic thrusts that gives that confidence. However, we do not see that impacting the reduction in the food prices. In fact, it is still going up. Last time there was an argument that when ringgit depreciate, because our food security management is not as good as it can be, we're importing a lot of food, so we are impacted by imported inflation. Having said that, we have not seen a dramatic drop in the prices of the food, except that now I think there are more eggs and more chicken. But you cannot solve shortages of eggs by visiting a plant in India. So you need to have a holistic food security plan by making food security as a national security agenda, and the establishment of a food security agency that will spearhead to ensure Malaysia, come what may, pandemic or non-pandemic, and other geopolitical and issues like Ukraine, Russia war, and all that, we overcome those things. I think this is very critical. So the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security has a very massive responsibility, and Anwar administration will be judged if they can help in the cost of living of the people. I think Anwar Ibrahim himself, as the Prime Minister, have been talking so much about the cost of living, about curbing cost, and and that's a good thing. Now, saying is one thing. How is the outcome and impact to the society? So I think more ministries must work very hard. We saw Rafizi, for instance, with his ministry. He managed to do
Dr.
a lot
Rais,
of
we're
things
running
for
out
the
of time.
data.
Maybe 30 seconds.
He have democratized the access to the data. I think that is a very good start, and I think it is good for people like us, the research houses, to be able to access real data all the time.